Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Okay. First, we'll introduce to prosthetics. So, what is prosthetics? Prosthetics is the study of evaluation, fabrication, and custom fitting of the artificial limbs known as prosthesis. And device to and prosthesis is a device which is used to replace or substitute the part of a missing limb uh, or the amputated limb to complete the functionality and mobility of the missing limb. Then what is prosthetist? Who is prosthetist and what he does? Healthcare professional who designs, fabricates, and fits limb prosthesis is a prosthetist. Okay. We all know what is amputation is. It is when a limb is surgically removed from the body or a part of the body. It's called amputation. So there are several causes of amputation you know about, but I have just to throw back a knowledge about it. Amputation caused about traffic accidents, workplace, factory, construction accidents, or agricultural accidents, firearm or explosive due to military or war regions, electrocution accidents, animal bites due to shark or tiger or any zoo accident also, congenital deficiencies like any proximal focal deficiency of humor, then malignant tumors, and gangrene and frostbites. And gangrene, we know it occurs due to malalignment of the plaster or very mistakenly plastering. And we know road transport accident is the most common, followed by the industrial and agricultural. So here it is what about level of amputations. First, we will go from distal to proximal. Toe amputation or toe articulation. Then comes ray amputation. Ray amputation is the removal of toe with the first metacarpal or its relevant metacarpophalangeal joint. It's called ray. And then comes transmetatarsal amputation, then metatarsophalangeal disarticulation, then Lisfranc amputation, chop parts. Then comes Boyd and Pyrogov. Here I show you. Here is the Boyd's and Pyrogov amputation. So, but we know Symes amputation is the most preferable amputation than the Boyd's and Pyrogov's, because the look and aesthetic purpose and also weight bearing and functional purpose of the in the Symes prosthesis or Symes amputation is much better than the Boyd's and Pyrogov's. So this is what the levels of amputations are. So we discussed about their partial foot amputations. Then here comes Symes amputation, then BK amputation. BK amputation have much more level of it. Very short BK, or standard BK, or ideal BK, what is called, and long BK. Then comes knee disarticulation. Then we'll go proximally supracondylar amputation or standard transfemoral amputation, then short transfemoral amputation, then hip disarticulation and hemipelvectomy. So aims of the prosthesis: to substitute for a lost part is the main aim of the prosthesis, and we can go by the objectives right now to restore the lost function, what is literally lost by the limb which is surgically removed, and comfortable ambulation or mobility, independent of mobility, we can say also, minimal or reduced expenditure of energy, minimizing the shift of the center of gravity of the body during gait for static balance and dynamic balance purpose. So what is an ideal term for a prosthesis criteria or prosthesis selection? What should be the criteria for an ideal term? It should have the optimum length, optimum shape, like round. It should have the conical shape. It should have the skin coverage. It should have soft, maximum soft tissue coverage to the bone, so that weight bearing can be very much comfortable. A healthy scar should be there, or adherent scars, mobile scar should be there. Adherent scar is totally impreferable in case of prosthetics. criteria. Then good muscle power, good range of motion for joints, no neuroma, no edema should be there, good vascular function should be there, and no phantom pain or sensation, no contracture, and fixed skeletal deformity. If any of these complication occurs or persists, then we have to manage them first, then we have to go for the prosthesis selection. Then what are the pre-prosthetic training? So active range of motion exercise, you all know, because maximum students are here from physiotherapy. So you know what is active range of motion exercise. Proper positioning of stump, like it doesn't have the muscular atrophy or contractures or a fixed deformity to it. Then muscle strengthening, it should have the muscular balance to it whenever we prescribe prosthesis to it. Then skin care, skin should be moisturized, there should be no wound or adherence that not should be there. Then cross training, then wheelchair training from bed to wheelchair, wheelchair to bed, like this. Then self care or independent care, we can say. Then patient and family education about the prosthesis and its use. So we have so we usually prescribe prosthesis on the basis of K level or the functional level. So K levels are from K0 to K4. In K0, the patient doesn't have the ability or potential to ambulate with or without assistance or a prosthesis. In K1, patient has the ability or potential to use a prosthesis or transfer or ambulation on level surface at fixed cadence. But in K2, a patient has the ability or potential or ambulation with the ability to transfer low level environmental barriers such as curves, stairs, and uneven surfaces. Or you can say the typical or limited community ambulator inside the society. Then K3, patients should have the ability or potential for ambulation with variable cadence, and it should we can say typical of the community ambulator, like market, or he can go to his office, or like a very potential worker. Then K4, the K4 in this grading, mainly patients come under the child age and the athletic age or the young age patients. So they should have the ability or potential for prosthetic ambulation that exceeds basic ambulation skills, like exhibiting high impact or stress or energy levels. Then we have the prosthetic training. So prosthetic, after the prosthetic fitting, we have to check the alignment procedure. Is it the height is right, correct or not? Is there any shortening or not? Is there any discomfort to patient inside the socket, or there should have any pressure point relief or collar check, comfort check? These we check after the prosthetic fitting. Then donning and doffing caring or training should be given to the patient so he can independently do that. Gait training procedure, we give them first we give them the static training or static stability training. Then we give them the weight transfer training or single limb stance or dual limb stance training. Then we give them gait training. Skin care training, how to take the care of skin after use of a prosthesis or the very often use of a prosthesis. So maintenance of the prosthesis and follow up after 6 months or 1 year, whether the prosthesis is correct or not, or whether any correction or any additional component is required or not. Lower limb prosthesis. So types of lower limb prosthesis are there, and it depends upon the different stages after amputation. So first comes the immediate post-operative prosthesis, and second preparatory prosthesis, then definitive prosthesis. So what is IPOP or immediate post-operative prosthesis? Ideally, IPOP with is a immediate post-operative prosthesis which is generally prescribed after the immediate after the surgery or amputation in the operating room. So it should have the controlled weight bearing as soon as the operation or surgery is done. Then initial patient treatment according to his choice, or component selection according to his choice is done. So what are the components? A non-removable plaster of Paris is applied over the patient's thumb. Then a pylon extension beneath to it. Then a prosthetic foot at the base. A suspension strap is encased in the plaster to be attached to the waist belt. So a suspension is also attached from the socket to the waist belt so that there should be maximum stability and there is no pressure over the stump. So waist belt is often prescribed in the IPOP. Usually, usually 20 pound or 10 kg of weight can be borne over the IPOP, and it should be the initial training. Then it can be continued up to 5 to 21 days after the surgery. So I have sliding. Okay. So what are the advantages of IPOP? It reduces severity of phantom limb pain and it reduces edema to or volume fluctuation what generally occurs after the surgery. Then patient sees a rigid dressing, then it is a positive psychological attribute to him. Then it reduces edema, as I said. Then maintenance of lower and upper limb strength and trunk balance. So postural balance would be there. Then physiological standing advantage also there, like cardiovascular status. He is used to it when the definitive prosthesis is selected for him later. Then we can prevent the contracture or the muscle atrophy. Then quicker identification of patient's activity level. So we can here identify from the IPOP that what kind of activity level the patient has and what components we should prescribe them. So then comes the preparative processes. Preparative processes is also known as the intermediate or training processes. So these are useful if the volume of the residual limb is expected to decrease or increase rapidly in the near future, or if a gradual reduction of joint contractures will require repeated prosthetic realignment. Whenever possible, the components of choice should be same as those anticipated for the definitive prosthesis. So normally the components in the definitive process and preparative process are almost same, but if any complication or any additional component is required in preparative processes, we can list out them, and according to activity level or functionality of the patient, we can prescribe them later in the definitive process. So preparative processes are indeed justified and present the best diagnostic and economically for a patient's mobility capabilities. So these are how IPOP or preparative processes look like. The first socket is for the volume fluctuation. That's why it is adjustable with the strap, Velcro strap. So here comes the definitive processes. So what are definitive processes? Definitive processes are the final processes or the permanent processes the patient is given to use after the gait training. So we can start from distally. So partial foot processes first comes. Here you can see these are the cosmetic or cosmetical restoration or toe processes for the toe amputations. You can see here, and these are some you can see here. This one. Hello, Bilal, are you there?
Yes, yes.
Actually, I am having some problem with the slides. So
So what happened?
actually, it's not going back.
You can minimize the screen, no problem. You can minimize screen, then you can take it to front and back. Okay.
Okay.
Just try after minimizing it. Maybe then you can do it.
Okay. Now is it?
You can exit the full screen. Maybe after that you can do it.
I'm trying to exit, but
Maybe it's lagging. Uh, what's the main problem? Means you want to go back, you are not able to go back.
no, wait, I'm trying it.
Okay, okay, carry on.
Okay, now the screen is visible.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay,
You can continue like this. It's visible. Don't worry.
okay. No, it's having problem actually. Okay, I'm just continuing like this. Okay.
Okay, you can continue.
Okay. Here are the partial food processes, or it is for the toe amputations, or this is basically the cosmetical fingers usually prescribed. These are made up of silicon gels or silicon materials. Then here you can see this is a UCBL, or the shoe insole, which is incorporated with the cosmetical or toe filler for the ray amputation, this one, and for metatarsophalangeal disarticulation or uh, metatarsal amputations, transmetatarsal amputations, you can prescribe this. This is also incorporated with toe filler and UCBL. So we can also prescribe toe filler incorporated within the AFO kind of design, uh, like I have shown here you. Then these are the chop part and Lisprance amputation, where we can prescribe the patient with a cosmetical foot or made up of silicone gel liners. Then here we can see the Chopard's amputations, Chopard's prosthesis. The prosthesis is at the mid leg level, and it is connected with the cosmetical restoration foot, and it has as it is more proximal to the malleolus because of the liver system, so that it should have a very smooth gait and stability to it. So this is how Chopard's prosthesis look like. You can see here it is a posterior opening here. We usually give because of the bulbous end distal to the Chopard's amputation stump. So it is generally incorporated into the special Chopard's food. There are available also in prosthetic market. So in Symes prosthesis, here we prescribe inner flexible, outer rigid cell Symes prosthesis. So this is what a anterior cell is there and a posterior complete A4 kind of design, and there is a inner flexible, you can see here in white color is there. So this can be also prescribed for the Symes prosthesis. Then another design for the Symes prosthesis is Canadian or the posterior opening socket design, but as it is cosmetically not very good, that's why it is replaced by the VAPC medial window kind design. So you can see here, this is a VAPC science process with medial window. It is a medial opening given here, just proximal to the malleolus level, so that the pulvous end of the stump can easily go inside the prosthesis or the socket. So these are some specific science prosthetic foot also available there, uh, which can be most energy storing or the most uh, functionality available for the science amputation or the science amputated patients. Then what are the exoskeletal and endoskeletal processes? So exoskeletal processes has its structural strength from outer laminated cell. So it is a rigid processes from the outside and through which the weight of the body is transmitted. But in endoskeletal processes, the structural integrity is generally achieved by the inner endoskeleton, that is the pylon, which is made up of metal or carbon materials, which bears the weight to the ground. Then in exoskeleton, it is quite durable due to resin socket, and the distal parts or the distal seam pieces are generally filled by a material of wood or foam, which is shaped by the any machine to give a cosmetical appearance of the amputated limb. But in the endoskeletal processes, the cosmetical appearance is generally provided by the foam, polyurethane foam, like uh, it is very easy to grind, and it is very easy to give it a shape like a normal or the amputated limb which is lost. Then few knee joints and prosthetic feet can be used in exoskeletal processes. A very few, maybe very 2 and 3 uh, options are there. But in endoskeletal processes, most of the knee joints and prosthetic feet can be used, as it is the most demanding and advanced prosthetic design right now. And exoskeletal process is very heavy to maneuver, while the endoskeletal process is light in weight. And in exoskeletal processes, if after the fitment or the final fitment of the process, if any adjustment or any interchangeable of components due to some complications is required to change, then it is quite difficult in exoskeletal processes, while in endoskeletal processes it is very easy and easily changed. So we can come to transtibial processes. So what are the criteria for a transtibial stump? It is the ideal length should be 12 to 17 centimeter of the stump length, or you can say 2.5 centimeter for every 30 centimeter of height. If increases, we can or decreases, we can change it to 2.5 centimeter. We can vary that. So in minimum length 5 centimeter from the tibial tubercle. So what are the types of the stump? Very short. Uh, we can say that immediate or the immediate amputation below the tibial tubercle, then short, then standard, then long stump. And you can see the criteria over there. I have drawn here, and then these are the parts of the transtibial processes. This is a below knee socket. Then here is the liner or the stump socket interface. Then it is a pylon. Then ankle foot assembly or the prosthetic foot, here you can see, and a suspension system. It is not seen here, but I'll show you later. So socket. What is socket? It encloses a stump and forms it uh, it incorporates the connection between the stump and the artificial limb. It protects the stump and the weight bearing forces or the shearing forces. It protects the stump from the shearing forces or the weight bearing forces. So what are the types generally? The patellar tendon bearing socket or the PTB socket, or total surface bearing socket, TSB, then PTB SC socket, or generally known as supracondylar socket, then PTB SCSP or the PTB supracondylar suprapatellar socket, or RCR socket, which is generally known as the range of motion, comfort and rotational control socket. So what is a PTB socket? In PTB socket, we generally load the weight in the pressure tolerant areas like patellar tendon and medial tibial flare. although the PTV socket is a total contact design, but the weight is one more concentrated uh, on the patellar tendon, so it is known as PTV. And it is and here patellar bar is formed to bear the weight from that, and the PTV design was created to take advantage of normal forces on the patellar ligament. So this is done by how it is done. This is done by adding initial 5-degree flexion of the socket while we do the alignment, or while we fix on the pylon. Then we add initial 5-degree flexion to it. Then total contact socket, how it bears weight: 60% weight through the patellar tendon and 40% through the medial tibial flare. While the distal end of the stump is generally offloaded in it. So what is a TSB socket, or total surface bearing socket? So the intent in designing a TSB socket is to distribute uniform pressure over the entire surface of the limb. So the we generally compress the soft tissue and relieve the bony prominences area. And how we relieve it? We add there some soft materials like foams, and we relieve the bony prominences, and the an entire soft tissue is grasped by the socket, and weight bearing is more comfortable in TSB socket rather than the PTB socket, because it is not concentrated just on the patellar tendon bar. So uh, so it avoids actually the malalignment or the discomfort over the patellar tendon. So it has a circumferential or the circumferential weight bearing pressure over the all over the stump. Then we come to PTVSC socket, or PTV supracondylar socket. So the in here the design is quite different from the PTV socket. While the medial lateral beams are purchased over the femoral condyles or extended over the femoral condyles, but anteriorly they dip downward to form a more traditional trimline near the distal end of the patella, which is generally not seen in PTV socket. The PTV bar and its knee extension control are thus eliminated, and it has better medial lateral stability as it purchases over the femoral condyles. So it provides better medial lateral stability. This socket may be indicated when a patient wishes to do a lot of kneeling or cannot tolerate the quadriceps bar, or encapsulation of the patella is there, or in case of short stumps or medial lateral instability. In that case, we can prescribe this socket. So what is the PTV SC and SP socket? It is the supracondylar and suprapatellar extension of the trimline. So it is generally prescribed in case of short stumps where pseudoarthritic instability is there, like hyperextension or genu-recurvatum is there, or very short stump with medial lateral instability or ligamentum laxity. In that case, we can prescribe this socket. And there is a different modification to it. The socket differs from the standard PTV socket in that the medial lateral anteriors extend higher and fully encompass the condyles, whereas the posterior wall is unchanged, as it is same as the PTV SC socket. And that bar is also given modified there, or we incorporate into it for the correction of genu-recurvatum. So RCR socket. It stands for actually range of motion, comfort, and rotational socket, rotational control socket. It increases the comfort of the socket because the trimline is more distal to the inferior edge of the patella. So it gives relief to the inferior patellar edge, and it increases range of motion and allows the patient to take longer stride. And whenever the patient sits and stand, patient feel confident and feel very comfortable while he rises from the seated position. And compared with other sockets, the RCR increases comfort, especially during the knee motion in extension flexion, and also whenever the patient walks on the ramp or inclined surface, the patient is more comfortable in axial socket rather than any PTVSC or PTV kind of design or TSB socket kind of design. So bent knee socket is there, and where it is prescribed generally, if there is a condition like short or contractual residual limb, or the fixed flexion deformity is there with dysmuscular condition, or flexion contraction more than 30 degrees, it can be managed with other socket. But when it is more than 30 degrees, we have to prescribe bent knee socket, as it is not possible to go with other socket. The weight bearing forces can be distributed very well. So the bent knee socket is a prosthetic socket which is generally fixed in 90 degrees of flexion over the seam piece or the pylon extension beneath to it. So these are some interfaces uh, which are used in transtibial prosthetics. These are generally termed as stump socket interface. It separates limb or the stump from the socket, or it acts like a medium between the socket and the stump. It mimics soft tissue to provide extra cushioning. And what are the advantages? It provides shock absorption, it protects from shear forces, and it provides and weeks of moisture. And what are the types? Socks and nylon sheets, or inner gel liner, or flexible inner socket with rigid outer frame. So this is what you see here on the top. You can see here the inner flexible inner liner with a rigid outer frame, and here you can see the sock, transtibial sock, and here you can see the inner gel liner, or many silicone liner are also available there. So suspension system. What is a suspension? Suspension actually is designed according to activity level, comfort, or safety to connect the prosthesis to a residual limb. If suspension is not adequate, then motion occurs between socket and limb called pistoning. So during the gait or the swing phase, the prosthesis may come out of the limb. That's why we give suspension system, and it gives also additional stability to the prosthesis. Supracondylar suspension. So it, as we saw in the PTVSC design, it is similar to that, but somehow we incorporated some like foam material or Velcro or buckle closure to provide this supracondylar suspension over the supracondylar region. Then it is generally incorporated with PTV or PTV-SC design. So Monster Cup suspension. Here it what looks like. It has a strap and two fork straps to attach the medial proximal aspect of the medial and lateral aspect of the socket, and it is most commonly used or the most cheaply used cup suspension available there for the transtibial prosthesis. And it is a waist belt, and as I told you previously, waist belt is generally used in case of post-operative and intermediate prosthesis or the IPOP prosthesis condition, because it maintains suspension regardless of residual limb. If the volume changes or decreases, in that case we often give this suspension system. It is also recommended when all proximal constriction must be eliminated due to skin or vascular conditions. So this is another suspension system, external knee joint with thigh corset. Corset must fit above femoral condyles. And what are the indications? In patient with unstable knee, obese patients or heavy patients, aged ones with short term, or geriatric patient. Advantages. What are the advantages? Weight bearing through the corset is very comfortable. Maximum mediolateral stability, prevents genu recurve bottom. But it has also some disadvantages, as it weight bearing weight is borne through the corset, so there is a wasting of the quadriceps muscles occurs, and there can be muscular atrophy, and it is very non-cosmetic, and it is very rarely used. We don't prescribe it often for the patient or the geriatric patient, we go with other options. So subtle pin lock, the pin that is attached to the liner, you can see here this pin, and it is a transparent socket. You can see here the pin is attached to the silicon liner. It may be a silicon liner or gel liner, and the locking receptacle incorporated into the distal socket. So here it is the locking receptacle which is incorporated into the distal socket, and the pin is inserted into it and it is locked. So the stability in this suspension system is is much better than the other suspension system we just discussed. So it is it is often used, but it is generally contraindicated in case of sports processes. So this is a slip suspension made of a nylon sheath, or can be silicon slip suspension. So it is worn over the socket directly over the proximal or the thigh section. It can directly worn, and it is also very comfortable and easily available suspension system right now. And it is a vacuum suspension, so it is very expensive actually. And how it works, the patient has to wear the silicone liner or gel liner and push the limb into the socket, and here is there a way or channel which passes away the air or the in the valve, and that comes to the vacuum pump, and this is how it locks the stump which is within the liner along with the socket. So it is very stable suspension system right now, and it is generally used in sports processes and athletic condition. It is very often used. Then this is a osseointegration. It is not actually suspension system. It is a different prosthetic fitment to. It is a very advanced prosthetic fitment to the transtibial patient or transfemoral patient is also often done. So how it is done? The direct structural functional connection between the living bone and a prosthetic device. So the pylon is directly attached to the bone or the skeletal portion is what is remained. It is attached to it. Then it eliminates the need of a traditional socket type of prosthesis. So we surgically implant a rod in the bone that can connect to any prosthesis through an external connection. So it is a pylon, and you can see here the fixture is put into the bone, and here is a abutment screw to which the pylon is often fixed, and beneath it the foot system is very much similar to the normal prosthetic. So what are the ankle foot assembly? So we have many options right there, because almost 20 or 30, 20 or 25 kinds of foot, but we can describe all that or discuss all that. So I have here about to discuss which are hugely used or very commonly used. So what is a ankle foot assembly? It is designed to provide support during standing or walking and shock absorption as well during the gait phase. So what are the types? Solid ankle cushion heel or sach foot, Jaipur foot, single axis foot, multi-axial foot, energy storing foot, or flex foot. Or you can say flex foot is a kind of energy storing foot. So, these are some types, but there are many available too, but we can discuss that. These are commonly used ankle foot assembly. So what is sach foot? It is generally prescribed for the patients with K1 level. So it is the commonest one which is used almost everywhere, and almost 50 to 60% of the patients usually prescribed with this foot, and there is no ankle joint in it, and the ankle joint actually is solid here. So solid heel made up of wood or metal. There is a cushion heel which generally provides plantar flexion or very smooth plantar flexion during the heel strike, after the heel strike, and it is very light in weight, and the maintenance is you can say maintenance is very cheap also. The Jaipur foot, it is also prescribed for patient with K1 level. It has also a solid ankle joint. It is made of a galvanized rubber with shaping of toes. Unlike Satch foot, it doesn't have any keel, uh, but it constitutes only the galvanized rubber. You can see here the toe block. You can see here toe block, and there is a foot block, then heel block is there. So and we can see here that this foot provides somehow the sagittal the inversion and eversion movement very little amount because of the rubber material within it. And here comes a single axis foot. Ankle plantar flexion or dorsiflexion are provided in a limited way in this foot, and rotation is not often available in this foot, but somehow in some design quite rotation can be available, but minimal inversion and eversion can occur according to the flexibility of the rubber sole, and toe dorsiflexion is simulated by the flexibility of the rubber toe section. And single axis feet have specific applications in it is actually very hugely used in transfemoral prosthetics rather than transtibial amputees. And it is also often prescribed for patients with K1 or K2 level. And this is how multi-axial foot looks like. It provides motion in all three planes, and it has a very good shock absorption, and inversion, eversion, you can say flexion, extension, plantar flexion or dorsiflexion movement, or inversion, eversion movement, and slight rotation is also available there. It is very used in athletic like golf or mount climbing, where there is uneven terrain. In that surface, multi-axial foot works very well. So it is for K3, K4 level, as I said, it is for very athletic or activity level patients, active patients. Energy storing foot, dynamic. So it is a dynamic response foot actually. You can see here during heel strike, the shock absorption is very much comfortable is there, and it provides immediate plantar flexion as there is a flexible carbon fiber keel, and it immediate it due to heel strike, it creates a momentum or forward propulsion which creates or which propels it to mid stance. Then during dorsiflexion or the you can see there the heel of the keel is the dorsiflexed above, and it creates a energy reflex or the release of energy which helps in the toe off or smooth ground clearance. So it is also prescribed for K3 or K4 level patient. So it is very useful in swing level ground clearance, if often prescribed it. So flex foot is a kind of that, and it also works similar like energy storing foot, and these are some variances of flex foot. While in the first picture, the flex foot can be attached to the socket through a pylon, whereas in the second picture it can directly attach to the socket. So these are some sprinting foot, cheetah foot, flex foot, and blades are there, but these are made up of carbon materials, carbon fiber materials, and it is very energy storing foot, and it is very used in often used in Olympic. You have seen uh, for sprints or running 100 meter, 200 meter sprinting. But it is a different chapter. If any class is provided to us in future for sports processes, we can discuss that. So we can come to knee disarticulation processes. The parts are there. First comes the suspension, then interface, then socket, then the knee joint, then come the pylon or the knee extension. The seam extension, and there comes the ankle foot assembly or the foot. So First, we have to look up to the what are the difference between knee degenerative knee degenerative processes and transfemoral, because the fabrication or the parts are somehow similar to the of the knee degenerative processes to the transfemoral processes. So, but some weight bearing conditions and some knee joints or knee control are different. So we have to discuss it first. In knee articulation, residual stump is long and bulbous. In transfemoral, it is short and conical. Then donning is often difficult in knee articulation as there is a long and bulbous distal end to it. But in transfemoral, it is easy as it has a short and conical shape. Then suspension, it enhances due to its shape because the distal end it has a bulbous end. So when it goes into the socket, it automatically locks up on the femoral condyle. So it has a very good suspension system. But in while in transfemoral, it is quite challenging. But with better suspension system, we can achieve that. Then prosthetic knee control is very easy in knee articulation. As you know, the longer the lever arm, the control mechanism or the functionality also increases. So it is easy. The prosthetic knee control is easy in knee articulation, but in transfemoral processes, it is quite difficult. Then energy cost or the cost of ambulation, or you can say it is very less in knee articulation, while in transfemoral processes it is more. So these are some sockets generally prescribed in knee articulation processes. First comes the inner flexible outer rigid frame. The first picture you can see here, and the medial window opening. And why a medial window opening is there? Because of the bulbous distal end, because it doesn't go into the socket, because while our proximal part is less wider than the distal femoral condylar part. So that's why there is a space given, like the science processes we saw there. A medial opening is there while it is covered by a partition or the extra piece window kind of piece to it. Then inner flexible outer rigid frame, it is very similar to science processes. First the patient has to wear the inner flexible liner, then he has to push into the outer rigid frame, and it is also here we can see the Bota socket design. It is it can be achieved in the inner flexible outer rigid frame socket too, but we can give it also in laminated cell or the rigid frame socket. We also can achieve there with a simple liner. You can see here the below the cursor is visible to you. Hello,
Yes.
the cursor is visible to you, no?
Yeah.
No, I can't see the cursor.
Yeah, I think so.
You can use any color one if possible.
Actually something is wrong with the laptop right now. That's why. Okay, you can see here the portion with gray color. You can see the first, the most outer cell, that is in black, and then inside it is a gray color. That is a liner or the foam you can say, or the soft material, and the white you are seeing here, the white thing, that is a stump. So when patient pushes the stump into the socket, the gray or the gray color you can see here, which is the soft material, this is compressed, and the stump is pushed beneath to the distal end of the socket, and the soft material takes its shapes above the femoral condyles, and it gives a very stable or good suspension to the prosthesis. So another socket is there, elevated vacuum socket. While the other design like Bota design or the flexible inner socket or the you can see here the medial window opening socket, it is often designed with the ischial weight bearing purpose. The weight is borne through the ischial weight bearing or can be borne through the distal end or the femoral condyles. if the femoral condyles are present there. Then elevated vacuum socket. So here the trim lines are sub-ischial. The ischial tuberosity is not involved here, and the need from the femoral condyles, the weight is often borne, and it is very good. It provides very good comfort and range of motion to the prosthesis or the patient. Then comes the transfemoral prosthesis. It has several parts like socket, suspension, knee, then transverse rotator, then pylon, then foot. So first comes the sockets. Quadrilateral socket. It has four distinct walls. You can see here four distinct walls. The quadrilateral, it is written here. And it is a ischial kind of design, and you can see the difference. The mediolateral dimension of the socket is more than the ischial one, and I will discuss that later. And you can see here, this is four wall, this is the anterior wall, this is the medial, this is the posterior, and this is the lateral. You can see here, this is a flat surface through which the open which the ischial tuberosity is placed, and through that flat surface, the weight is borne to the ground. So that I have discussed, the epidimension also narrowed than the mediolateral dimension. The ischial containment socket, so you can see here the anteroposterior dimension is more than the quadrilateral socket, and it control, it is designed according to CAD-CAM mechanism, like controlled anterior trochanteric and control alignment method, to maintain the femur in the adducted position, as the adductor longus muscle is often lost in the transfemoral amputation. So that's why the stump tends to go to abduction position. That's why it is very important to maintain the position in maintain the femoral position in abduction position. So through CAD-CAM method, we can achieve that. So what are the difference between quadrilateral ischial socket? Ischial seat for weight bearing is there in the quadrilateral socket, but in ischial containment socket, there is no ischial seat. But weight bearing areas are less in quadrilateral socket, while more weight bearing areas are provided in ischial containment socket. Lateral medial dimension, as I said, is more in quadrilateral socket, while it is less in ischial containment socket. FP dimension is less, or anterior posterior dimension is less, while anterior posterior dimension is more in the ischial containment socket. Poor pelvic control and rotation is often present there in quadrilateral socket, while ischial containment socket provides good pelvic control and rotational stability. Less energy, it is less energy efficient, the quadrilateral socket, and the ischial containment socket is more energy efficient. And in quadrilateral socket is often prescribed in standard stumps, where the stump length is often good, and ischial containment socket is generally used in short stumps and gluteus medius weakness conditions. So here you can say, see the quadrilateral socket, there is no bony locking mechanism, so it doesn't provide a suspension system to it, or it provides rotational movement around the stump. So it is very unstable. While the ischial containment socket provides a bony locking between the ischial lemmas and ischial tuberosity and the post trochanteric area. The bony locking method is there. It is somehow called the 3-point locking system, or it is often called. And by this, the stability is often provided by the socket, ischial containment socket, more than the quadrilateral. Malloanatomical socket, you can see here, it provides skeletal support along mediolateral ischial ramal complex. It encapsulates ischial tuberosity and ramus. Here you can see the medial trimline or the ischial trimline is much more exaggerated or the extended than the ischial containment socket, and it has a low posterior and gluteal trimline. It allows to sit on gluteus maximus. So what are the suspension system often used? The traditional pull-in suction suspension, roll-on suspension liners. Okay, let's discuss this. I have shown this is what pull-in suction suspension looks like. The patient has to wear a sock or nylon sheath, and he has to push into the socket, and then to pull the sheath or the sock through a medial hole, which is often present in the socket, and thus the pull-in suction suspension is achieved. This is how the Roland suspension liners I told you, and you can see here it is a subtle pin like suspension system which is generally incorporated into Roland suspension liners. So subtle lock systems we discussed. It is very similar to the transtibial one. So these are some other suspension system like suction suspension system or the vacuum suspension system. Then total elastic suspension system made up of nylon sheath. Then Silesian belt, which the belt is often incorporated into the socket on the lateral side and the anterior medial side, and the Silesian belt or the pelvic belt is present there, which is present around the iliac or the pelvic level or iliac crest level. So there are some knee joint types. Single axis knee units. It is a very simple hinge. It provides sagittal plane motion only. It has a fixed center of rotation. The cadence response is very minimal. It allows only flexion extension. As I said, it has only sagittal plane motion. No mechanical stability is there. Gives support during stance, not during swing. And some different design also available there with drop lock system, which is very much stable in stance phase, and it is a lightweight, durable, and it can be maintained very easily, and not good for the ones with having short stumps. So patient who don't have voluntary, who have the voluntary stability to them, they can stabilize the knee voluntarily. Polycentric knee unit, it has an instantaneous center of rotation or ICOR. It rotates around, you can see here the 4 axes is there, 2 proximal and 2 distal axis, and it is very often used in the endoskeletal processes right now, and it provides very good swing phase ground clearance, as while the 4 axis works together, the distal bar, you can see here the distal bar goes upward. That's why the length of the prosthesis decreases during the swing phase. So that's why ground clearance is very good, very better achieved in this, and it rotates. It also rotates in one axis, and it is often good for the long residual limb or the knee disarticulation patient. And for knee disarticulation patient and transfemoral patient, there are several length or the dimension to it for the polycentric knee joint. So weight activated stance control knee units. This is very much stable rather than the polycentric and the single axis knee joint. It has a braking mechanism. You can see here the screw is often loaded into the spring, then the weight is borne over the prosthesis. So it prevents the unwanted knee flexion while standing or the mid-stance phase. It can be adjusted according to the individual pattern. If initial contact made when knee not completely extended, it provides additional stability and prevent also knee buckling or the flexion. Acts like single unit in swing phase, and for recently amputated ones or the short residual limb or the geriatric patient or the patient with quadricep weakness, it can often be used. Manual locking knee units. So here it is prescribed generally for the patient or patient who don't have the voluntary control or who are very weak to control the prosthesis or the knee. So it gives stability during stance, and it is same according to single axis knee, while the locking mechanism or the stumble mechanism in this is very much enhanced. Locks when knee is fully extended, compromise toe clearance in swing. It is so less side than the contralateral leg. Then comes the hydraulic knee. Cadence responsive in this knee is very good because it has some dampening method and it can be adjusted according to the cadence of the patient That means if the patient is a slow walker, it can be adjusted. The cadence it can be adjusted, and there is a if the patient is a speed walker, and it can be adjusted too. Provides frictional resistance by the flow of hydraulic fluid, which is generally known as the you can say that the silicon fluid or magnetic rheumatoid fluid, or the it is a kind of hydraulic knee, MRF knee joint. It provides variable resistance. It is high cost, higher maintenance it needs, and the weight and difficulty is very much. And it provides swing and stance control, which is often called SNS system. And weight bearing stance control and swing control is very enhanced than other options. Pneumatic knee unit. It is a motor-driven needle valve often used to generate the pneumatic resistance that acts mainly in swing phase. This valve adjusts resistance values for swing phase flexion depending on walking speed. So it provides very better swing phase ground clearance rather than any other knee joint. So it is a cushion generated in the flexion phase by compressing the air, which is used to store the energy, and it re-expands to support the ensuing extension movement. So it eliminates the need of a need for a mechanical extension spring. So then comes the microprocessor knee. It is a very advanced knee used right now, and it is very expensive actually. And it contains a microchip processor, which are typically equipped with sensors that monitor the knee position and provide the swing and stance phase stability to the patient. And pressure sensors detects and evaluate the ground and the related forces like weight bearing forces and GRF during the stance. So it works better in stance phase stability and swing phase ground clearance mechanism. Then these knee mechanism provide a stumble recovery feature that limits unintentional bending of the knee. Like the weight activated stance control, it has also a stumble, but it is more enhanced in it. So whenever the unintentional bending occurs at the knee or the knee buckles, it provides a stumble recovery, and that sometimes occurs when walking on uneven terrain. So typically powered, it is typically charged by the lithium ion battery. And many microprocessor knee units are available there, but we can discuss it right now because the microprocessor knee unit is a very vast chapter. Then comes the transverse rotators. So there is a transverse rotator fixed to hip articulation or transfemoral processes to seat cross leg, because some transverse rotation often occurs, which generally is a shear force which is borne by the stump, and it can actually harm the stump or create discomfort to the stump. So that's why transverse rotators is often used, and it can help to reduce the shear forces on the stump, and patient can sit cross leg. External button is there to push the unlock to it, and it gets automatically when the patient is back to the neutral or standing position. Hip articulation processes. So you can see here, it is a socket from the proximal, then comes the single axis knee joint, then a pylon extension is there, thigh section extension is there, then comes the knee unit, and then comes the pylon extension, then foot unit. And here you can see it is a very traditional design, while the right one is the very advanced design available right now, but it is a very the left one is very traditional design. The socket, then comes the thigh section made up of wood or foam, then comes the knee section, then foot. And here you can see the single axis knee joint and single axis hip joint is there, and a rubber bumper is often there to stop the hyperextension of the hip joint. And there is a elastic strap. You can see here a very minor lining is there. You can see that elastic band, it is arrowed there. It provides the hip extension and knee extension movement during stance phase and swing phase. And these are some types of sockets used in hip development processes. This is a Canadian type of socket, or a traditional socket often used, and this is a modified and advanced socket that has been produced right now, the bikini socket, and it has a more diminished streamline than the previous ones. So there are some yeah, actually hip dysautonomia procedure is a very rare procedure, so we don't have the patient that much like transfemoral processes and the transfemoral processes. So very very much option, very less options are there actually to the sockets, and hip joint are there. So thank you. This is what the lower limb processes are about. And if we can have the sports processes, if it is allowed by the Mind Academy, we can have a sports processes session later.